I recently made a video about Dying Light, which is one of my favorite games of all time. It really encapsulates the zombie survival genre and has gone on to win countless awards and bring its developer, Techland, into the upper echelon of game developers. But it wasn't the start of their rise to fame, and it wasn't even their first zombie game. That, my friend, came from the one and only Dead Island. Dead Island was epic. Starting from the very beginning, even the first cinematic trailer was outstanding. It's still one of the best video game trailers of all time, and it went on to build an absolutely absurd amount of hype for the original game. I'm sure you've even seen it at some point. It starts out with a girl lying on the ground, and it slowly re-envisions the journey, in reverse, of how she turned into a zombie and ended up in such a terrible situation. The cinematography was movie grade, and the emotional journey rivaled that of Austin Powers trying to get his golf cart turned around in that little hallway. You know, I'm about to tear up just thinking about it. Due to the hype with these trailers and Techland's reputation from creating Call of Juarez Bound in Blood back in 2009, the game exploded at launch and sold over 3 million units in the first 3 months. It was a huge success. Techland's previous titles had never sold at the quantity that Dead Island had, and it was a big step for them as a company. So it's no surprise that once Dead Island gave them some publicity, they wanted to capitalize on it. A few years later, they released Dead Island Riptide, and the results were not the greatest. The game was an obvious rush sequel to the original game, and it really did seem like the publisher, Deep Silver, merely released it to make some money while they were still in the limelight. Now, don't get me wrong, there are quite a few people who stand behind this game and love it just like any title, but it was underwhelming at the very least. The game only sold about half the amount of copies as the original, and it was quickly overshadowed by something much cooler. Dead Island 2. The trailer for this epic-looking game was released at E3 in 2014, just 1 year after the launch of Riptide. In true Dead Island fashion, the trailer was amazing, and it's yet another one of the best video game trailers of all time. It quickly garnered millions of views and was one of the most talked about games at E3 2014. While the trailer didn't really give an estimated release date or anything like that, people assumed they would receive one in the near future, maybe within a year or so. So, they waited. It has now been 7 years, and we still have no release date. Development has switched between a few different companies, and there's been very little mentioned about the future of this promising title. So, what's the deal? Why is Techland no longer involved on their original claim to fame? Will it ever be released? We're going to dive into a full analysis of this situation and answer all of these questions and more in today's video talking about the mystery of Dead Island 2. If you remember the hype surrounding this game and enjoyed the video, feel free to leave a like and share it with a friend. I'm sure they would love to take a trip down memory lane. We're going to begin this story with the release of the original Dead Island game in 2011. At the time, Techland was pretty much a nobody and they didn't have very much clout in the industry. So to get their idea of a co-op zombie survival game off the ground, they needed to get a publisher on board to provide the funds. They ended up signing on with Deep Silver, a German video game publisher, getting the money to make their dream a reality. There was one catch though. Deep Silver would be the owner of the Dead Island IP due to the fact that they were the ones funding it. With this being one of the only options for Techland at the time, they signed the deal and Dead Island was released to the public in 2011. It was a good game and it was a lot of fun, but it did have some issues and it was met with slightly positive reception with room for improvement. However, it still sold millions of copies and it made Deep Silver a lot of money. So it comes as no surprise that they wanted a follow-up game as soon as possible, and Techland would, once again, be the ones developing it. But the relationship between Techland and Deep Silver was not all roses and butterflies. Due to Techland's lack of reputation in the game development industry, they didn't have the ground to stand on to negotiate a fair deal for the first Dead Island game. Thus, Deep Silver would get the IP and have a majority of the creative control over what happened in the game. In an interview with Techland game developer, I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce this, comments were made about the rocky relationship between publisher and developer. He stated that they had a lot of issues about how they wanted to run the franchise. Even with the first game, there were a lot of moments where they would disagree on the creative vision of the project. When the follow-up, Dead Island Riptide, was released just over a year later, these problems would worsen and the relationship between the two would go downhill even further. Deep Silver made a lot of demands for the development of Riptide, but then blamed Techland for the issues that were present upon launch. Thus, both parties involved were not enjoying the relationship, and it was inevitable that they would no longer be working together in the near future. This was reaffirmed when, right after the launch of Dead Island Riptide, which had average reception, Techland announced their new project, Dying Light. This time they partnered with Warner Bros. Games, who allowed them to have full creative control over what was being done. Techland wanted people to know that they were the ones behind Dead Island and that what they were doing now was going to be much better. And as you can expect, this was the final nail in the coffin for the relationship between Deep Silver and Techland. But Deep Silver still had a very valuable IP that was sitting in their portfolio as a goldmine with unlimited potential. They weren't going to let Techland take over the limelight with their upcoming spin-off to the Dead Island series. They weren't going to let some petty game developer encroach on what was theirs. So on June 9th, 2014, a year after the original Dying Light trailer was released, Deep Silver released the Dead Island 2 trailer at E3. This trailer was epic, and today it has over 12.1 million views on YouTube. It featured a cinematic video of a guy slowly turning into a zombie while running to the beat of The Bomb by Pigeon John as the world slowly devolved into chaos behind him. The music was a perfect fit, and it was an outstanding trailer. And people were even more surprised to see that at the end of the trailer, Dead Island 2 was going to be developed by Jaeger, the masterminds behind Spec Ops: The Line. Techland was not a part of this project, and many people looked at this as a good thing due to the mediocrity that was found throughout Dead Island 1 and Dead Island Riptide. It was set to release at the end of 2015, and everyone was excited to see that date approach. As time moved on, not much was heard about the development of the game. People knew the basics, like how it was set in California and how it had a quirky and not so serious approach and sick craftable weapons. They knew this from a released gameplay demo that was shown at Gamescom 2014, which was honestly slightly underwhelming. It looked cool, but people definitely thought there was more that could be done to make it better. But that was the full extent. No news or major updates were posted by Jaeger or Deep Silver for nearly a year. Then, in April of 2015, Deep Silver announced that the game was going to be delayed until sometime in 2016. They claimed, "We've always set ourselves a big goal for Dead Island 2, to create the sequel that takes Dead Island to the next level. We've been looking at the game long and hard, and we've decided that we didn't reach that goal that we set out to achieve quite yet. This is why we decided to delay Dead Island 2 to 2016. It seems about right. Dying Light was released in early 2015, so why compete with a game that had an overwhelming success in the zombie genre? Plus, might as well spend that time making the game better. It sounded logical in theory, but there was more to it than initially meets the eye." After 3 years of development, in July of 2015, Deep Silver announced that they were dropping Jaeger from the development of Dead Island 2. They inadvertently stated that Jaeger was not helping to create the sequel that Dead Island fans deserved and that they would be parting ways. Jaeger wanted one thing and Deep Silver wanted another. Sounds to me like the exact same situation that Techland and Deep Silver were going through, a power struggle for control of the game. Publisher-developer relations are frequently quite rough in the game development industry. From a personal perspective, I don't understand why these publishers are so demanding on the developers. I get that there's a significant financial investment involved in these projects, but why don't they trust the people that they're paying to make the game? Jaeger proved that they knew what they were doing with Spec Ops: The Line, and Deep Silver obviously thought they were capable of making Dead Island 2, hence why they worked with them in the first place. To me, it's the equivalent of hiring someone to make you a painting and then guiding their hand while they do it. Pretty much no matter what, it's gonna ruin the painting. Upon the departure of working with Jaeger, Deep Silver announced that they would now be working with the company known as Sumo Digital. These people were the brains behind Forza Horizon 2, Little Big Planet 3, and a couple other super random games with no pattern behind them whatsoever. Some fans were quite pleased with this announcement, others were surprised, and others were upset. However, it was looked at as a mere roadblock in the development cycle of what would hopefully be one of the coolest game sequels of all time. From here, the game fell off the radar once again. It wasn't shown at E3 2016, it wasn't shown at E3 2017, E3 2018, or E3 2019. What was going on with Dead Island 2? Was it ever going to release? News finally broke about the state of the game in August of 2019. But it wasn't good news. Or was it? Who knows? It was revealed that once again, Dead Island 2 was going to be changing developers, this time to Dambuster Studios. Who's Dambuster Studios? They made extremely impressive titles like Time Splitters and Crisis before they were sold to Deep Silver and released Homefront: The Revolution. What a great game. I don't know how a company could go from Time Splitters to Homefront: The Revolution, but I have a feeling that it's due to Deep Silver. If you can't tell, I'm not a big fan of Deep Silver because they played a part in turning Saints Row into Agents of Mayhem. I'm just salty at how that series went downhill after the third title. Anyways, after the new team came on in 2019, people were once again optimistic about announcements in the future of the game. I mean, it's about time. At this point, it's been in development for 6 years, so it had to at least be close to being completed. But as you would expect, this was not the case. In fact, the only thing that's really been said about Dead Island 2 since 2019 was in December of 2020. A user tweeted at Deep Silver asking about Dead Island 2 when another guy responded and told him to give up. Deep Silver then responded to this other guy with a tweet that said, "We wouldn't be so sure about that." And that's the best we got. Of course, E3 2021 just passed and once again, nothing was heard about Dead Island 2. In fact, Deep Silver even told people not to expect it at E3 2021. It's now been 8 years since work started on this title, and we still have no idea what it looks like, when it's going to be released, and why it's taking so long. It's pretty much halfway there to becoming a modern Duke Nukem Forever. I feel like it's lost in the depths of game development history, and when it does release, it will probably have little to no hype remaining. But there's only one thing that's worse than losing a game into the depths of Deep Silver's greedy stomach: losing your wallet. That's why I partnered with one of my favorite brands that I've ever worked with, Ekster. Ekster is a brand of wallet that helped to transition me from a user of cheap mobile phone wallets to a distinguished gentleman carrying one of the highest quality card holders that money could buy. These things are sweet, with a super satisfying card mechanism that never gets old, premium materials like sleek and sturdy aluminum and high quality durable leather, and even a built-in tracker that connects directly to your phone and keeps you from losing it. I made a pact on Twitter that I'm never going to support brands that I don't use myself, and trust me, I've been using Ekster on a daily basis for almost 2 years now. If you're interested, they're currently running a 4th of July sale that gives you 15% off their entire store. Plus, you can get an additional 5% off when you use code ROBO at checkout using my link in the description. So click that link if you're interested in stepping up your wallet game, and thanks again to Ekster for sponsoring this video. So it seems like we're going to have to continue to wait on news about Dead Island 2. It's been so long now that the game is looked at as a complete mystery. So let me know in the comments if you're still even excited about this game. It's always a rough situation when developers switch mid-process, so I hope it'll turn out good. Do you think it will, or do you think it's going to be underwhelming after the release of Dying Light 2? Drop a comment down below or let me know on Twitter. That's going to be it for today's video, so I hope you all enjoyed. Drop a like and subscribe if you feel like it, and thank you so much for taking the time to watch this. I will see you guys next time, and peace.